For the first time since 2001, I'll just add, when Boston threw a parade for Ray Bourque, the Colorado Avalanche will be playing in the Stanley Cup Final. Get ready. It's a good time. Welcome back here on The Sweat. Adam Kaufman, and more importantly, joined by our crew of NHL experts. We have Paul Bruno. We have AJ Scholz, both from RotoWire as well as NHL.com fantasy editor Anna Dua. Sorry about the whole, Canadian team not reaching the Stanley Cup Final again.
Look, if you guys want to send Sidney Crosby up north of the border, we'll call it even. How about that, AJ? What do you think?
No, we'll keep him.
Okay.
We're good.
Shut down the Canadian talk then.
Yeah, well, I know we're not going to be talking about your Leafs during this segment. The Avs, they swept away the Oilers. They're not headed to the Cup Final. Does it matter, though? The Rangers, the Lightning, the two-time defending champs at that, are one of them going to come out, or do you expect Colorado, Paul, to lift Lord Stanley's Cup when all's said and done?
You know what? I think defense wins championships, and both Tampa and the Rangers will have an edge in that department over Colorado, regardless of which team makes it to the final. So I don't think it's going to be a walkover for the Avalanche. And they also will have some time off here, and I don't know how that's going to affect that team. But we've seen how it affected Tampa earlier in this series, and it's a different version of the Lightning that is rolling right now.
Anna, who's your favorite of the three that remain?
I mean, honestly, after the performance I saw with the Avs against Edmonton, it's Colorado's cup to lose. I mean, the big name players for Colorado really just came out blazing. Makar had that 5-point game in game 4. He has the 4th most points in the entire league this postseason per game with 1.67. And that's the most out of any of the skaters that are remaining in this postseason. And now I'm taking a look at Nathan MacKinnon. We all know how great he's been, but his numbers are just so dominant. He has 82 shots on net in these playoffs. And the next closest player was Zach Hyman, who had 67. So he's by far the number one guy in that category. And even if you take a look past the big name guys that we all know and love on Colorado, like Lehkonen came out and had 6 points in this 4-game series against the Oilers. So this team has depth. They have a lot of depth. They can hold their own against either of the two teams that are coming out in the East. And they want to win this year. So it's their cup to lose.
Who's your favorite, AJ?
I absolutely agree with Anna. I think it's Colorado's cup to lose. And the fact that they might get Darcy Kemper back, he backed up in game 4 here, could be ready. Although at this point, Pablo Francouz has looked really good. I don't know that they'll want to, mess with things there. But Kemper should be healthy and ready to go. Now, the one thing I will say, and I've been saying it all postseason, until the Lightning lose a series, it's not necessarily the best bet to go against them here. So if they can come back from the Rangers, it may not be quite as cut and dry for Colorado here to just walk through one, but I think they absolutely should be the favorites.
We will get back to the NHL playoffs, guys. Big game tonight coming up. But in other NHL news, I'm not shocked. I'm mildly surprised just because a few weeks have gone by. It seemed like he could have been in the clear. Bruce Cassidy, he is out as the Bruins head coach despite 6 straight trips to the playoffs, including a trip to the Stanley Cup Final as well. And this is a Boston team that's got so many questions, and bring back Don Sweeney as general manager. Brad Marchand, Charlie McAvoy, 2 of the better players there, are going to miss the start of the season with injuries. The captain, Patrice Bergeron, who also just had surgery, may retire and may not come back. And of course, as mentioned, they need a new coach. So, AJ, where does Boston go from here?
Well, I'm not surprised, first off, to see Emerson bail on hosting today, with all this Boston talk. He was probably crying.
Couldn't handle it.
Couldn't handle being on there. But look, I do think maybe the coaching change is a sign that Bergeron's not coming back, that they're going to go full rebuild here. And I do think the thing to watch is who they hire. If they bring in somebody that's maybe veteran coach like Barry Trotz, although he's been heavily linked to Winnipeg, somebody that could come in and coach like an NHL playoff caliber team right away, then maybe Bergeron's coming back. But if not, then, maybe it's time to bring in an up and coming coach, restart the roster, that sort of thing. So I think the coaching hire will be pretty indicative of what we should expect to see in terms of retooling on the fly or rebuilding outright.
So Paul, probably not going to be like a John Tortorella then.
No, it looks like a situation of 2 steps forward, 2 steps backward before they start moving forward again, rather. And I think the coaching change will indicate that in spades. I don't know that this was strictly a fire or was it a mutually agreed situation. I'd like a little more clarity there, but I can't imagine that Bruce Cassidy would tarnish his image. The guy's had a stellar record coaching this club and getting the most out of this group, and it just might simply be time to reload and rebuild here.
Well, I will tell you, Paul, Sweeney said this morning Cassidy did not take the news well, so I mean, it was probably pretty one-sided. Anna, what do you think? Where's Boston go from here?
I mean, there are tons of questions. And, this is the tough part. I think we could all see this eventually come into this point. And it's difficult to see a team that you're so used to seeing being so dominant and having everything figured out get to this point. But it happens to every single club. And Boston definitely has a ton of questions in that department. But they do have some things to be excited about. I, for one, was super impressed by the performance of Jeremy Swayman in this postseason. He only played 5 games against Carolina, but he had a good 4 out of those 5 games, posted above a .900 save percentage in those 4 games. So I like the way he played against a very dominant Carolina Hurricanes team. And that's a piece I would be excited about. They do have Charlie McAvoy. And so there are a couple of guys on this team who you could build around if you wanted to in the future. But I mean, they're on the verge of a teardown right now. I don't think there's a question about that.
Let's talk East Finals, guys. And Tampa trying to avoid, obviously, going back to New York down 3-1. It's not a literal must-win, Anna. We'll stay with you. But how important is this game in sunny Florida?
I mean, at this point, every game is a must win, right? And the Lightning barely managed to get out of game 3 with a win to get them at least one win in this series. So I think they really want to come out blazing in this game to tie it up a little bit more. I mean, when we take a look at the Rangers, one of the biggest things we've noticed, and we knew this going into the playoffs, was that Igor Shesterkin's performance would be a huge factor in the Rangers going as far as they have. And in game 3, he's still made 49 saves on 52 shots. And he's just been dominant since that series against Carolina, but this is his first full postseason in the NHL. And so he's still pretty new to the scene. And we saw against Pittsburgh, there were times when he got rattled and it stayed with him for a little bit. So when we're getting this deep, you can't have those rattles and those questions stay with you as long because it's going to have a way bigger impact. So if I'm Tampa Bay, I want to throw some questions around Shesterkin tonight and I want to come out with everything I've got so that you could finally get the series tipping a little bit in your favor.
AJ, Bolt's going to even this thing up?
I think they will. And I think they have to. Part of it outside of the obvious, right? Like going back to New York, trailing 3-1 versus going 2-2 is a whole different ballgame. But we just heard from Coach John Cooper, if this thing goes to 7 games, they might get Braden Point back. And that would be a huge addition for them. So from that standpoint alone, extending this series long enough to get him back, bolster their top 6, give them a little more depth by moving some guys around, I think would be huge.
Pablo, who have you got?
You know what? As we get deeper into the series, it's about momentum and pressure. And those would shift back to the Rangers in one case and the Bolts in the other. Can you imagine going 2-2 and then the Rangers dressing room thinking, man, we had these guys down and had our foot on the throat in game 3 and we let them off the hook. What did we do here? They may have released something that they won't be able to put the genie back in the bottle, I don't think. If Tampa ties this up, I think the momentum's all in their corner. And with the prospect of Braden Point coming back, that's another bullet in their chamber. So it's critical for the Rangers to send the series back home with a 3-1 lead. If they go back 2-2, I think they're in real trouble.
We only have time for one more. DFS captain for the showdown tonight, Rangers Lightning. Paul, right back to you.
With Tampa poised to tie the series tonight, I think I'd be tempted to go with Vasilevsky, who's due for a shutdown performance after surrendering 11 goals in the first 3 games, or maybe even look at Kucherov, who's been a magician with the puck distribution that he's been showing in these playoffs. But I'm going to go with their captain and top trigger man, Steven Stamkos. He comes into the game on a tear with 5 goals and 5 helpers in his last 10 games, 39 shots on goal in that stretch. He's going to be on the top power play option again and comes in cheaper than the other 2 guys. So captain him and add the other 2 later in their lineup to save some money.
Anna, your captain?
I mean, I think Stamkos is a great option. He was definitely the player I was looking at from the Lightning. But when we're thinking about captaining a player, I'm looking at consistency. And it's tough to argue against Adam Fox right now. He's on that impressive 8-game point streak in the playoffs, which is just unreal. 5 points in the first 3 games in the series against Tampa Bay. 5th most points in the entire league this postseason with 23. And, regardless of how this game goes, Adam Fox is going to show up. And he's just a really reliable player to have in that category.
AJ, take us home.
Let's point out first, for some reason, Brian Elliott is the most expensive player on the slate. I wouldn't use him because he's not going to play. But I like the call on Vasilevsky, but I think instead I'm going to keep it simple. Nikita Kucherov, 14-7 is the price tag, 20 points in the postseason, 5 in the last 2 games. If the Lightning are going to win this and even up the series, it's going to be because Kucherov put some points on the board. So stick with him. Don't overthink this one.